you had actually sent a letter encouraging the Department of Justice to look into him for a FARA violation. For those people who will see this clip later on the internet, can you just briefly explain what FARA is?
It's the Foreign Agent Registration Act, and it means if you're operating on behalf of a foreign country, you have to register and declare yourself as such.
To provide some context for those looking at this, Mr. Singham's in total given $1.3 million to an organization called Code Pink, as well as over $278 million to various nonprofits since 2017. Secretary Rubio, it's in my opinion, observing what's been happening on both sides, really contributing to the political divide in this country, that many countries are engaging in influencer operations to include psychological operations on the American people with the intent to undermine not just our foreign policy from the administration's perspective, but also to pit us against one another. Would you concur with that statement?
There's no doubt, absolutely.
Are you aware of any countries in particular that are currently engaging in this?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that we see evidence of it from the CCP. We've historically seen some of it as well from Russia historically in the past in a different way. I think you're starting to see some of it from Cuba, and I think some of these are linked with one another. In fact, that group that you just mentioned actually traveled to Cuba, stayed at a very fancy and expensive hotel that is sanctioned, and I think are now being looked at by the appropriate officials to see if they violated U.S. law in the trips that they're taking. But there's no doubt that when you have people showing up with pre-printed signs 24 hours after Nicolas Maduro was arrested and extradited to the United States, that's not an organic movement. Someone's paying for that.
I think one of those organizations would be the National Network on Cuba, which is a pro-communist, anti-American organization comprised of dozens of member organizations to include Code Pink, the Communist Party USA, Democrat Socialists of America, Socialist Worker Parties, and various organizations to include Armed Queers of Salt Lake City, which Tyler Robinson, the individual who murdered our friend Charlie Kirk, has loose ties to and association with at the time of the assassination. I just want to point out that from my perspective and in talking with you personally, I can see that you are very much of the mindset of peace through strength, but also pursuing peace first before you hit people with a big stick. So I appreciate that perspective because it is refreshing and not common in Washington, D.C. But with that being said, I heard a lot of talk today on Russia specifically. I understand that peace talks are very much so alive and well, and that the United States, for the first time ever, at least with this administration and you heading the head of the as the Secretary of State, have been instrumental in those talks. I would like to, though, ask you, for the first time in 20 years, recently, we had the Russian Duma come here to meet with members of Congress. What is the end result when Congress fails to open up dialogue and at least maintains communications with another superpower like Russia?
Well, I think there's two things to discuss. One is the war in Ukraine, which we'd like to see end through a negotiated settlement. And separate from that is a bilateral relationship with a country that possesses, if not the largest, the second largest nuclear arsenal in the world. At a minimum, we have to have relations and conversations with Russians. We just do, whether we like what they're doing or not, because given those factors that I just pointed to. I've had multiple conversations with the Foreign Minister Lavrov, and we have to, because that's mature diplomacy and it's important. It's the same with China. We have to have communication with them, and there are issues in our bilateral relations that have nothing to do with Ukraine. So now, I think our relations with them will be friendlier and easier to pursue once the war in Ukraine is wrapped up, and we've made that point in this engagement. But I think what we've learned, and certainly I think has been affirmed to us in the last year and a half, is you're much better off having someone to talk to on the other side than not. And this is a president who's willing to meet with and talk to anybody. He doesn't view talks and engaging a foreign counterpart as a concession, the way it's been treated in the past. Sometimes it leads to something, sometimes it leads to nothing. Sometimes that vehicle of communication proves incredibly valuable in a potential conflict or crisis.
I'd like to end by saying this. I completely agree with you. I think that it is our job and responsibility in Congress to maintain open dialogue and discussion. But I do think that you guys will be successful in this peace deal. And so I want to be the first to congratulate you on that, because I think that sometimes in this instance, having the courage to step up and do the right thing and lead by example is a big thing. So with that, Chairman, I yield the rest of my time.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, it's good to see you. You were the first person I